Let's open our Bibles tonight to the book of Judges, chapter 11. We're only going to read the first verse, but we will be using most of the chapter for the lesson and sermon tonight. Judges, chapter 11, verse 1. Helps if you're in the right book. I started reading verse 1. And it was not what it was supposed to be. And then I looked and I was in the wrong book. So even the greatest of us can be wrong. Let's try it again. Judges chapter 11. Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor. And he was the son of an harlot. And Gilead begat Jephthah. There are several things in the life of Jephthah that when we read them, it'll make you almost stop and scratch your head. What on earth was he thinking? There are many questions about Jephthah that we will never know the answer to. And even when we think we have an answer, we'll never agree in this life on every aspect of his situation. The vow that he made was to God. He vowed a vow to God. It was an absolute, irrevocable, undeniable vow, a promise that he made to God in his certain circumstances. And then, of course, the sacrifice of his daughter is the other main thing that comes up for discussion. Did he offer his daughter as a sacrifice? Did he kill his daughter as a sacrifice? Should he have killed his daughter? Should he have made the vow to God? What should he have done when he found himself in a situation that there is no easy way out? There's been a lot of debates over the vow that he made and whether or not he sacrificed his daughter as a sacrifice to God. Many good, honest, very scholarly men have looked at this chapter, and many of them have taken opposite sides. I remember even in college, way back when, there was a debate over what he did, whether he should have done it, and what were the consequences if he did whichever position. You know, we often think of the Bible as a book of answers, but there's a lot of things in the Bible that we'll never have the answer to in this life. There's a lot of things that we debate, discuss. I gave you an example last year that was a big debate. In fact, there was a book written about this particular subject. A book was written by a very famous scholar, Christian man, a man who devoted his life to studying the Bible and then, studying the world. And I'm using a lot of his notes on Wednesday night. He wrote an entire book on whether or not Adam had a belly button. You think I'm kidding? It's not. No, I can tell you the author, and I can probably check and Google and see if the book is still out there. I think that would almost fall under one of those foolish and vain questions that we often get into. Certainly not worth wasting a tree, and whether you agree with his answer or not, I disagreed, even though he's a scholar. But why are we debating something that we'll never know in this life? Who cares if Adam had a belly button or not? And yet those are questions people fight over and answer. Same thing in tonight's lesson. There are people who say he fulfilled his vow. There are some who say he did not fill his vow. And so there are scholarly men who will take both sides. I'm going to give you the bare facts. I'll give you what the Bible says, and then I will ask you some questions, because part of my job is not to tell you everything. It's to make you think. One of my teachers in college said, I am not here to teach you the Bible. And I thought, well, that's dumb. We're in a Bible school. We're in a Bible college. What else are you here for if not to teach us the Bible? And his answer was, I'm here to teach you how to study so that you can study and learn on your own without having to say, okay, wait a minute, what did Brother Brubaker say about this? What I believe hinges on what Brother Brubaker said, and I don't remember what Brother Brubaker, that was his name, Brother Brubaker, I don't remember what he said, so I don't know what I believe, because all I believe is what he said, and I don't remember what he said. So he told us, my job is to teach you how to study. I can't answer all of the questions, but I can at least give you the questions. Hopefully you'll do some of your own research to understand the story of Jephthah. First of all, we have to look at his background. What was going on? What happened? Why was he where he was? Why was he ostracized from his family? Why did he make such demands of his family when they asked for his help? In looking at his background, we start with his parents. His father's name was Gilead, and there was also a city named Gilead. So he was a Gileadite, the son of Gilead. So there was a double play there. He was the son of Gilead, who was of the tribe of Manasseh. Now, when you were here on Wednesday night going through the Bible survey, I'm not going to ask you how many of you remember, but if you remember, Manasseh was divided when they divided the land. Half of Manasseh stayed on the east side of the Jordan River, over in the country that they had taken from Og and from, the other fat king there, and his name Sihon. They captured the land of Sihon and Og, and so half of Manasseh said, we want to stay over here. The other half of Manasseh said, no, we're going into the land that God promised us, that God gave us. We're going to cross the Jordan River. We're going to go into the promised land and get our inheritance in the land God gave us. But half of the tribe said, there's a lot of grass on this side. Grass is necessary for cattle. We have lots of cattle. We're going to stay here where the grass is. Gilead, from what I could find, was of the group that stayed on the east side for their much grass. Some argue that he was of the other side. I don't think we could prove definitively either way, but he was part of the tribe of Manasseh, half of which stayed, half of which crossed over. Gilead, as I said, from what I could find, stayed on the east side. Now, his father had an affair with a harlot. In the affair, she conceived and bare a son who was named Jephthah. So he was the son of a prominent leader in Manasseh, but he was also the son of an harlot, not the son of his father's wife. That would have made him a full-blooded son. He was half-blooded son, and so he was the son of an harlot. Now, while that's quite normal today, I have just about had to stop asking people, for many years, I would meet someone and I would say, well, are you married? Do you have children? Thinking, marriage, children. And I started getting, now it's so prominent that I barely ever ask. It's like, no, I'm not married. We're living together. We're thinking about getting married. And we've got X number of kids. Person a few weeks ago, I slipped up and said, so are you married? And do you have any children? Yes, I have, I think she said 3 children. And we may get married someday. Today it doesn't carry the same stigma that it did back then. In biblical times, it was a terrible thing. It was a embarrassing thing. It was a disgraceful thing. To be the child of an harlot, you could not even go to the temple for so many generations. It was that bad of a situation. So his half-brothers said, we do not want to be identified with him. He's the son of a harlot. We don't want to be identified with him. And we don't want to share our inheritance with an illegitimate brother. He's an embarrassment. I think every family has a black sheep. I could name my father's side of the family, and I could tell you without question who the black sheep of the family was on my dad's side, and I could probably tell you who the black sheep was on my mother's side. Everybody has somebody that it's like, oh no. If they ask, don't tell them you're kin to me. His brothers wanted no part of him. They refused to recognize him, and they thrust him out, kicked him out of Manasseh, sent him off to get away from here. We don't want people knowing that you're kin to us. Now, I couldn't help but think, and I don't cover politics more than 20 or 30 times a service, but it kind of reminded me of our current president. I don't know if you have kept up with the current president and his son. His son had a child by a prostitute years ago, and the current president refused to even acknowledge that he had a grandchild. Now, he would count the 7, I believe it was, that were legitimate, but he never would recognize the 8th grandchild because my son had an affair with a prostitute. I don't claim that baby. I want no part of that baby until the press got on it, and he recently, very recently, came out and admitted, yes, I do have another grandchild. But he didn't want any part of it. He didn't want to be identified. So we can understand a little bit of what his brothers must have felt like. He's a disgrace. To admit that he's our brother, we would have to admit that our father was unfaithful We would have to admit that our father had an illicit affair. We would have to admit that our father was a shameful person. And so it's just easier if we sweep it all under the rug and just deny that he exists. You know, as I thought about it, our actions often have far-reaching effects beyond what we could possibly think. I'm just going to have an affair, no big deal. Your sin will affect far more people in far more ways than you could ever dream of. I said, you know, and years ago they were trying to legalize prostitution on the basis that it is a victimless crime. Some of you may remember when they were pushing that. They probably still are, but much more sly about it. It's a victimless crime. In the Old Testament, every time there was an illegitimate affair, it wasn't victimless. There were victims. There were children that were affected. There were families that were affected. So much so that if you had an illicit affair with a woman other than your wife, you both were to be killed. It was that big of a deal. It was that important that you keep yourself pure. But sin, I mean, I'm sure Gilead never dreamed that his kids would exclude his own son. He never dreamed just how far-reaching his affair could produce and how far it would go. And when you and I sin, we never know just how far-reaching the consequences will be for those around us. In the case of a pastor, and I've known many pastors over the years. My first experience, I was about 4 years old. Our pastor at that time that I thought hung the moon, I thought he was the greatest man on earth. I thought he was a godly man until he ran off with the church secretary one day. Well, it's no big deal. It split our church. It affected people. When I was working in college, many years later, it's like 15, 16 years later, I invited one of the employees, hey, why don't you come to church with me sometime? And he said, no, I used to go to that church. Well, I didn't know him. I was only 4 or 5 years old. He said, I was there, and he called the preacher's name. I was there when he ran off with the church secretary, and I have never set foot in church since. I doubt that the preacher thought about how far 14, 15, 16 years later, people were still using that as an excuse to not serve God and not even attend church again. It destroyed families. It destroyed, like I said, split the church. It caused in the community. It turned people against religion. Oh yeah, all preachers are like that. All preachers are guilty. Even today, one preacher messes up and every one of us fall under the shadow of that man's sin. Gilead never realized the consequences of his sin when he had an illicit affair with an harlot. Our actions carry results beyond what we can ever possibly imagine. Notice what happened next, and all of this is in chapter 11. children of Israel were attacked by the Ammonites. The Ammonites were a fierce army. And when they began to attack or get ready to attack Israel, Israel became very much afraid. And to make it worse, nobody would stand up like David to Goliath. Nobody would stand up and say, I will lead the army against the Ammonites. Everybody was scared. By this time, Jephthah had already moved out of the country, already had a small army around him, already established himself as a mighty man of valor. And so when they needed a leader, they needed a soldier to lead the army, it's thought, Jephthah is a mighty man of valor. He already has a small army around him. We'll get Jephthah to lead the army against our enemy. And so they sent for Jephthah. His brothers went to him and said, we are under attack, or about to be. We need a mighty man of valor. We need a mighty warrior to lead the army and conquer the Ammonites for us. Well, there was a lot of back and forth. He reminded them, wait a minute, aren't you the same guys that did not want me around? You were ashamed of me. You disowned me. You kicked me out of my country. You kicked me out of my home. And now you want me to come back and deliver you because you are in trouble. Now, I remember how you treated me. Why should I help you? Why should I risk my life when everything was going well? Y'all didn't want me around. Now that you're in trouble, you want me to come deliver you. It's kind of like people that don't want a preacher, don't want church, till they get in trouble, and then suddenly they want the preacher and the church. Pray for me. Well, yeah, we did kick you out. Yeah, we didn't want anything to do with you, but now we're in trouble and we need you. And so Jephthah said, okay, I'll agree. And he made some conditions, laid down some rules, and they agreed. Jephthah then did something that Joshua did, Moses did on several occasions. They have already come ready to attack. But before we go to war, I'm going to at least try to make peace. And so Jephthah sent some messengers to the king of Ammon and said, can't we avoid war here? Why do you want to fight us? Why do you want to kill us? It wasn't a hothead that just jumped off. He legitimately tried to make peace. And their answer was, and there's so many things wrong with their answer, I wouldn't have time if I wanted to. But their answer was, 300 years ago, Israel stole our land. How many of you remember 300 years ago? One or two of you maybe. 300 years ago, Israel had come out of Egypt. 300 years ago, Israel conquered our territory, and it became part of Israel's land, and you all defeated us, and you all stole our land. So Jephthah gives them a history lesson. Wait a minute. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We didn't steal your land. We were going to the land of Canaan. You all came out and fought against us. We didn't initiate it. You all started it. You fought against us. God gave us the victory, and we only fought because you all started it. God gave us the victory. God gave us the land. And if you want it back, see if one of your gods can take it back from us. You put your trust in your God with a little g. You put your trust in your God. Our God gave us the land. You can have whatever your God gives you back. Well, they would accept nothing than 100% return of their property. No compromise. And have you ever noticed, and I said I don't get on politics more than 20 or 30 times per sermon, but have you ever noticed how that, because we're the nice guys, we're always willing to compromise for the sake of peace? The devil doesn't compromise. Oh, well, yeah, they gave an inch, yeah, but we had to give a yard to get that inch back. No compromise. We'll go to war. We'll do whatever we have to do. We will accept nothing less than 100% of the land which you all stole. Now, I've been told, and sometime when I'm in usually a doctor's office or someplace, and, they always ask, your name, your address, your social security, and your birthday. Give them my name, give them our address, give them my social security. And then when it comes down to the birthday, November the 22nd, 1951. And if they're in a good mood, I'll say, I know I look like it was 1851, but it really was 1951. That usually makes them laugh. But I'm told that way back yonder somewhere in my ancestry, there is a possibility, maybe, not confirmed, maybe a possibility that my ancestors owned slaves. Shouldn't have said that, should have. They'll be wanting reparations from me now. Does that mean that I'm responsible because my great grandfather may have owned slaves? That doesn't fall on me. I wasn't born. I doubt if I was a thought in anybody's mind except God. But then we come down to the final point. Jephthah made a vow. Notice there in chapter 11, in verse 30, Jephthah vowed, which means the most solemn oath possible. He vowed, he made an oath to an oath. He vowed a vow, not just to his brothers. He made this oath unto the Lord. Solemn vow, an oath, a guarantee. Lord, if you will give me the victory, in verse 31, then it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to greet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. A couple of things I want you to pay particular attention. Notice whatsoever. He probably was thinking his dog, maybe a goat, maybe, an oxen or something. But it was whatsoever, no limit, no hands barred. Whatever it is, the first thing that meets me, I will offer as a burnt offering to the Lord. That is a solemn, sworn, guaranteed oath that he made to God. Whatever, no limitations. Now, in the Old Testament, vows were very common. I think of the Nazirite vow as one example. There were many sacrifices. There was the several burnt offerings. There were sin offerings. There were thanksgiving offerings. There were many kinds of offerings. But the burnt offering was a particular type of offering that he said, I will not just offer an offering, I will offer a burnt offering unto the Lord. I assume you'll get to that in Exodus. I'll save the details for you then. But it was whatever, no restrictions. First of all, that was a dumb vow to make. I've always wondered when kings would say, King Ahasuerus said it to Esther, and then Herod said it to his granddaughter that appealed to his lust. Whatever you want, up to half of my kingdom is yours. What idiot would give half of his kingdom to a girl whose only merit was she could dance in such a way as to appeal to his lust? I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. Duh. I will give whatever as a burnt sacrifice. I couldn't help but think of what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 5:5. Solomon said, better is it that thou shouldst not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay it. There's no rule that says you have to make a vow. Better to have never made a vow than to make it and not pay. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, but let your communications be yea, yea, and nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. My word should be good enough. If I say yea, my word should be good enough. You don't need to, what was it? See if I can remember it. Some of you may have to help me out. I swear on a stick a needle in my eye and something like that. I swear with my pinky vow. I'll make a pinky swear. I swear I'll do it. Be careful swearing, because Jesus had a lot to say. Your words should be good enough. Let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, because anything above that cometh of evil. But then James summed it up in James chapter 5. But above all things, my brethren, above anything, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay. How many, well, I'm sure some of you have heard, I swear on my mother's grave. If you have to swear on your mother's grave to get people to believe you, you've already failed as a Christian. I swear on a stack of Bibles. You know what? I've been in court, and I've called up to the witness stand, and the guy comes over. Well, the last time I was in court, they didn't even do this, but used to. You'd place your hand on the Bible and say, I do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Last time I went to court, they didn't even do that. Do you promise to tell the truth? Yes. And then I said, so help me God. I didn't get to testify long. The defendant didn't like what I was saying, so he moved to have me struck very quickly. Had I known the law, I could have prevented that. I didn't know the law back then. Let your yea be yea. If I say it's true, I don't need to swear. I don't need to. Well, what about swearing in court? I meant with every ounce inside of me. I meant before God, when I sit down on that witness stand, I will tell the truth and nothing but the truth. But how many times do people, I call it taking God's name in vain. I swear on Jesus Christ. No, listen. My yea should be yea. Back to Jephthah. He swore with an oath. He swore with an oath. Whatever, doesn't matter, whatever meets me first, I will offer as a burnt sacrifice. Notice in that same passage, he said, I will, verse 31, I will offer it up. He was expecting something other than what he got. He was thinking it. What? Not who or whom. He was thinking it and what? So God gives the victory. God kept his part of it. God kept his terms. God gave the victory, solidifying his oath. He goes back home, and his only child, a daughter, is the first thing to run out the door and meet him. Judges chapter 11, verse 34. And Jephthah came to Mizpah unto his house, and behold, his daughter came out to greet him with timbrels and with dances, and she was his only child. Beside her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that he rent his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low. Thou art one of them that trouble me. For I have opened my mouth unto the Lord, and I cannot go back. You skip down a couple of verses. It said that in verse 39, it came to pass at the end of 2 months that she returned unto her father, who did with her according to his vow which he had vowed. Remember the question I asked you this morning? What do you do? If you keep your vow, you're going to have to commit murder, which is a violation of one of the 10 commandments. If you don't keep your vow, then you've lied to God. You made a vow to God, and you did not keep it. What do you do in that situation? I remember one of the other students in college said that you repent of making the vow and ask God to forgive you for making the vow, which was a dumb vow to begin with, and then you spare your daughter's life. That is certainly one possibility. How many times do we make promises? Wish I had $1. I'd be happy with $1 for every person that's ever been in a bad situation, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's in jail, whether it's something else. Preacher, if God gets me out of here, I will see you in church the next Sunday. Well, some of them go back 40, 50 years, and next Sunday has never come yet. We make promises. If I get out of the hospital, I promise you, you will see me in church. Hasn't happened yet. They made a promise. They promised God, and they did not keep it. Maybe your promise was to a child. I learned when our children were young, you better guard what you say. Can we go swimming? Can we go to the park? Can we go bowling? Can we do this or that? Yes, dear, I promise we'll do it. And we never get around to it, and soon our children don't believe anything we say. God kept his part of the agreement. But what do? Do you violate part of God's law in order to keep the other part of God's law? Or do you break the other part of God's law in order to keep the first part? I think I don't remember the student's name. I think in that case, there's no way you're going to win. If you break your vow, you broke a vow to God. If you killed your daughter, you committed murder. I think I would recommend go to God and say, God, I sinned in making a stupid vow, but I can't override one sin by committing another sin. I sinned in making a blank card, a blank check. I sinned making a vow. And if I commit murder, I've committed another sin. I think the advice he gave, certainly the best that I could come up with. Either way you go, you've sinned. You sinned in making the vow without fully understanding the consequences, or you sinned in committing murder. Be careful what you promise, folks. God may see if you mean it or not. I mentioned how many people have promised to be in church. If God just gets me out of jail, if God gets me out of the hospital. How many times have I heard, preacher, if God will get me out of this situation, I will give him a tithe from this day forward, and they never give a penny. Be careful making promises. God may see how much you mean it. When my wife and I stood before the altar there at Clarksville, we stood before the altar, Brother Wilson on this side, us on that side, about 300 or 400 people were there at the wedding, and we made a solemn promise to each other. Nowadays, that means nothing. My wife promised to be with me, I don't remember all of it, but in sickness and in health. Boy, has she got her share of sickness. In poverty and in wealth. She keeps asking, when's the money coming, you know. But we made a promise, and we took that promise seriously. We made that promise, and no matter how bad things got in our marriage, we made a solemn commitment, and we were determined by God's grace, we're going to keep that commitment. We made a promise. What kind of promises have you made and didn't keep? I don't remember. God does. He remembers every one of them.